Now I'll invite you to get into a comfortable position to hear some spoken words from Rev Ryan and myself. As always, you can put your view on speaker view to see who we are and who's talking. And Ryan, I will surrender the pulpit to you.
Good morning. Well, it's always kind of fun of where is Rev Ryan going to be? It's kind of where is Waldo for church. So where is Rev Ryan going to preach? I'm preaching from a closet. How fun is that? Because far too often this month is about coming out of your closet or hiding in it. So hold on, you guys. Here it goes. June, pride, sexuality, and spirituality. Where do I even start? Let me kick off this little sermonette by inviting y'all to do a little time traveling with me to a pride parade of my not so distant past. It was Portland, 2016, and I was attending our National Presbyterian General Assembly, back in the days preceding the pandemic apocalypse when people actually interacted in person. Dressed in a rainbow, a favorite color combination of progressive denominations such as the unis and presbys, a few fellow pastors and I were parading towards the annual Pride Parade when we were forced to pause at a protest blocking our path. It was a protest filled with fear, hate even, and it hurt. It hurt because it wasn't some off-the-wall, ticked-off prejudice group of picketing people that was blocking our way. It was my fellow Presbyterians. My own clan had gone LGBT Ku Klux on me. Religious division is a common theme throughout history, and almost all of the mainline faith traditions have split at some point around the issue of sexuality, many multiple times. The group that was protesting that day had recently resigned from our national church upon its acceptance of any and all sexual affiliations. And although they had split, they were still stuck on this sexuality side of spirituality, a topic of debate and deliberation, not to mention damnation throughout the decades. This is not merely a Western religion thing. For example, though there is no evidence of condemnation of homosexuality in the ancient Hindu or Buddhist text, a strong bias to that community has begun starting in the 19th century and has been on the exponential increase ever since. For the most part, the Unitarian Universalists have not seen the same splits and squabbles over sexuality as other religions, and this is likely because many seek out Universalism because they have grown frustrated by the exclusionary practices of former faith traditions. Needless to say, I made it to the Pride Parade that day and marched alongside of our sexually diverse sisters and brothers, but with a heavy heart and a heretical idea. By the way, it's been said that there's no such thing as heresy in religion anymore. There's only denomination. We'd rather divide than discuss. And the decades of debates around sexuality only further proves this point. So my idea, I was going to become gay. After all, the evangelicals protesting claimed that sexual orientation was a choice. So why couldn't I just choose to like men? Makes sense. And that's just what I tried to do. So for a week, I frequented all the best LGBTQ hangouts. I danced with and hugged some very attractive guys. I stared at Speedos and even wore one of my own at the hotel pool and played into all the stereotypes our society has cast on our labors. However, by the end of that week, I still had not succeeded at making myself like men. Furthermore, though I remained accepting of all orientations in terms of others, I never experienced anything but acceptance from the LGBTQ community for that matter. I wasn't sure whether I would be able to accept myself had I succeeded at switching my orientation. I had to come to terms with my own intrinsic bias, bestowed on me from years of being taught sexuality in terms of straightness. Could I be proud of who I was had I successively switched my orientation? My experiment taught me several things. First, our sexual orientation is not a choice. Remember, I failed at my experiment. Second, love is. Third, religions that claim to be centered around love are often those that hate the most. And finally, we have preferences, and that's important. Our struggle with self-acceptance can cause us to question our opinions, preferences, and perspectives. But we must remember preferences are part of who we are. You need to be confident, proud in your faith, your beliefs, your opinions, and celebrate them without the need to broadcast or force them on others. Just drop my notes. Preference occurs when we see and respect all the choices and prefer one over the other. It requires dialogue and open-mindedness. Preference allows diversity to thrive. Prejudice occurs when we choose one without opening ourselves to learn from and grow with the other. Prejudice is the root of conformity, and it is founded on fear and insecurity. Whereas preference is a pure form of pride, prejudice is an egotistical example of such. And finally, racism occurs when our fear-rooted prejudice turns to hate. And we believe that there is only one way to be ourselves, and that lies in the belittling or discriminating of others. Now I'm going to pass things off to my esteemed colleague here, Reverend Russ, to further dive into the racial side of things. But before I do, I want to share a quick conversation that I have with the Creator. I often picture myself sitting next to the artist formerly known as God, reflecting on life and the lessons learned by living it. I'll let you pick your preferred name for this eternal enmity, as any name is insufficient. But here goes. So about the sexuality and sin thing, I'd ask. Ha! She would laugh. Do you really think that with all the hate, violence, and woundedness of the world, that a person loving another person, whatever gender it exists between, would be that which causes me to cringe? That I would condemn a person for loving another of the same gender when across the street a heterosexual hypocrite is committing a hate crime? It's absurd when we say it out loud. But the truly absurd part is that hate and fear often speak louder than love. Recent stats show that 17% of hate crimes are based on sexuality. Think about that. That's nearly 1 in 5 acts of hate based on love. More crime is the shame that hate provokes. 39% of LGBTQ youth under the age of 24 admit they have planned their own suicide, and 17 have attempted it. That's 14 times the norm. Again, we can't choose who we're attracted to, but we choose who we love. And that starts with loving ourselves, taking pride in who we are, regardless of our orientation, pronouns, age, race, religion, or so forth. None of that matters. As Desmond Tutu claimed, acceptance starts with understanding that I am me because you are you. Unity through, not despite, diversity. My being proud of who I am allows others to be proud of who they are. My being me welcomes the other to be prideful in who they are. You're being you. It allows us to take pride in who we are because we are one. This is not an egotistical pride, and it's not easy. It's scary even. Our deepest fear is that we are not inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure, wrote Marianne Williamson. It is our light, our rainbow, that most frightens us. And thus we have to ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous, to be proud? Who are you not to be, she continues. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, to be proud, as children do. So as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people the permission to do the same. And as we are limited by our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Be proud of any and all of your colors, because each is bright and each is beautiful and brilliant in its own way. So Reverend Russ, it's all you.
Thank you. Bryn, I'll turn over a host to you in just a moment. May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was murdered. Protests and marches around the world prove the power of a 9-minute video. I didn't notice it at the time, but Floyd's killing was just days before Pride Month of 2020. And though pride marches and demonstrations had been canceled in 2020 because of this crazy pandemic, the rise of Black Lives Matter movement took the attention of our nation and the world. Now, I didn't notice it at the time, but Pride Month pivoted to become in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter activities. Now, perhaps Pride Month became overshadowed or diluted. I really wonder. Because on June 5th, 2020, the LGBT community members in Austin, Texas, marched from the city hall to the Texas state capitol and observed 8 minutes and 48 seconds of silence, the time police officer Chauvin held his knee on Floyd's neck. The march was organized by a diverse group of LGBTQ members in Austin. Almost simultaneously in Los Angeles, LA Pride 2020 was canceled from the pandemic, as everywhere. But on June 3rd, the LA Pride organizers announced that they would hold a march in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement on June 14th in the Hollywood area. This merging caused strong reaction and objections by both BLM supporters and the LGBTQ community. And the turmoil is not because it's a bad idea, but because it wasn't talked about or coordinated beforehand with all the groups. Now, there's no denying that there are many intersectionalities between the Black Lives Matter movement and the LGBTQ movements. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement was founded in 2013 by Black queer women. Paris Khan Colors, Opal Tomante, and Alicia Garza. They founded Black Lives Matter movement. All marginalized groups who suffer under the dominant white hetero male power structures have a lot in common. They know the pain. They share blatant oppression, different but joined. But if we only focus on the intersectionality, if we only seek out our similarities, if all I do is look for something in you that reminds me of me, don't we dilute the ability of a person to have pride in whom they are? This is something I'm concerned about. That as the minority populations become greater in number in our culture, in our country, and as the white population transitions from being the majority to becoming the largest minority, that we'll lump the non-white minorities together. A 21st century act of separate but equal. And this begs the question, can you be in solidarity with a group that is different from yourselves and still be seen for who you are? Will you be assimilated, or can you retain your individuality? I'm concerned that we won't spend the time and effort to recognize and appreciate the nuances of differences, but we'll just lump groups into stereotypes, the way white supremacy culture always has. We're not one tribe, but we are one, linked together, apart yet bound up. June is Pride Month. Let us never forget to dilute the importance of what has been achieved for our LGBTQ communities. Never, ever think that the struggle is over. This is the month to celebrate the diversity of sexual identities. It's Pride Month. To be proud of LGBTQ people. It's Pride Month to recognize the continuing struggle against hate. It's Pride Month to see our LGBTQ colleagues as holy and whole just the way they are. Now, I agree with Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." But we should not push all injustices into one group. We should not push all marginalized people into one category. This month, may we see the inherent worth and dignity and the divine spark in all members of our LGBTQIQ plus communities. May it be so. Blessed be and amen. So Ryan, I was intrigued by what you said about that love has been divisive as implemented by many religions. Wow. Whew.
It is. It's well, we try to force love. We try to define love. It's one of those weird four-letter words. It's in biblical terms, what do they say at weddings? The greatest of these is love, out of our spiritual tenets. But love isn't easy because it's so easy. It's love is a feeling, not a thing, not something we have to study and create and work at. And love is what we do when we let our own guard down and we realize that we are one, but we aren't the same. Oneness is far from sameness. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's hard, and it's hard being who you are. I'm curious, Russ. It's like, as a white, privileged, middle class, middle-aged minister, like, I oftentimes feel a little bit, I struggle being that. Do you ever feel not prideful being who you are?
Well, I'm not middle-aged. I'm more like 3/4 age, 7/8 age. But yeah, it is difficult, not because of what I've done, but because what has been done by people like me. And I know I've done many injustices because I'm blind to it. I mean, it's like the thing about the fish doesn't know that they're in the ocean and they're surrounded. When you're part of the white supremacy dominant culture and control everything, it's hard to know the harm you do on a regular basis. Yet, I feel the call to be countercultural and to do the justice work and to raise up the voices of the oppressed, to recognize them for who they are so that they can fully feel pride of who they truly are. Yeah, we're not done. It's messy, it's complicated, and we can do amazing things together. Okay, let me try and get back to my screen. Thank you all for listening.